Okay, so hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Tu Novio late night adults only edition. I just want to say thank you to Adriana for being a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago. We talked about self-love, purpose, and creativity, and how purpose and creativity kind of go hand in hand, especially if you are a creator, because it is kind of tough to always be on and create content. Like there's days where you don't feel inspired at all. Like I know sometimes I go through like those waves of emotions, like, you know what, I don't really want to make anything today. But we had a really good discussion with her. So if you want to check her out and see some of the amazing content that she makes with fashion and traveling, check her page out. It's Desert Songbird on Instagram. But for this week, it might get a little emotional for me. I don't know about the two guests that I have here with me today, but I have two amazing hosts, and they actually host their own podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. I have Vanessa and Melissa from the I'm Uncomfortable podcast. So I just want to give y'all a huge shout out because we're going to be talking about writing letters to your ex, which is like mind blowing. I would never do that. So welcome, ladies, to the Tu Novio late night show. And how did y'all start this podcast together?
Oh my goodness. Oh, first of all, thank you, Carmen, for inviting us on. I mean, this is our first live on YouTube situation. So me and Vanessa were like, how do we even do this? And thank you for bearing with me with my technical difficulties. I swear I use Zoom all the time. And then the moment I need it to be like, no problem, it ends up being a problem. But to answer your question, me and Vanessa are actually childhood friends. We met each other in elementary school. We went to a private Catholic elementary school. We went to different high schools and then went to different colleges, but we always talked about and joked about whether it was a sitcom that we would have because our lives were just so insane and funny. And whenever we'd have our catch-up sessions with each other via phone. Or we joked around about, me and Vanessa both went through non-traditional routes in our studies. And we were always joking about like, we'll share our little cardboard box when we're homeless together and we'll be chilling. But we always felt like we were going to do something together, whether it was run a business or do something. So we actually attended a conference back in February of 2020, the Create and Cultivate conference in Los Angeles. We made it a whole weekend and we saw a panel of women that were talking about their business ventures and their podcasts. And I kind of looked at Vanessa and I was like, that could be us. Like we could do that. And then Vanessa was like, okay. And then I ended up circling back with her like maybe 3 weeks after that with like a Google Doc of like, here's how we could do it. Let's do it. What else are we doing? We're in lockdown right now. So we started the podcast during lockdown in May. So yeah, we've had a full first season and we're in the midst of our second season. And yeah, that's how we've started our podcast. And the whole point of it is to really get to a point where we're discussing topics that are seemingly uncomfortable, like writing letters to your ex, and finding ways through discussion with whether it's between the two of us or with guests to be more okay with it at the end of the day. So yeah, that's pretty much the concept of I'm Uncomfortable.
I love that. I mean, perfect timing, right? You all like went to a conference before we even knew what COVID was. So that's kind of crazy to me. And then y'all started in May.
Yes.
So I think for me, when I first listened to the episode, I was like, okay, like I'm intrigued, like I'm uncomfortable. Like, am I gonna be uncomfortable listening to the episode? But honestly, like I felt seen when I heard that episode. So one of the things first I want to know, like, where did y'all get the inspiration to write a letter to your ex? And whose idea was it? Because I'm like, if my friend told me like, hey, like write a letter to your ex, I'd be like, girl, like, do you not know me? Like, I really don't be putting myself out there like that. So whose idea was it?
It was 100% my idea. I definitely bullied Melissa into it. And I feel okay, so the idea, the concept of writing a letter to like a lover or ex-lover is not a new concept. Like this has been done throughout history. Writing letters is a thing. And over time, obviously, like that's changed, right? We had like AIM and MySpace and Facebook and email. And so a movie came out. Oh my gosh, what is the movie title, Melissa?
To all the
To all the boys,
boys I've loved
yes.
before.
To all the
Oh,
boys I've
hate me.
loved
I haven't
before.
seen it yet.
Oh yeah, no spoilers.
Oh my gosh. And no spoilers, but it was just so like pure and good and just like talked about like young love and what it's like. And she wrote letters to the boys that she had loved before. And I think I also heard a podcast, shout out to the Asian Boss Girls podcast, because they had done a similar episode where they wrote letters to their ex-boyfriends. And I was like, we need to do this. This is so uncomfortable. And when they were talking about the lessons that they learned, I was like, wow, that makes me uncomfortable for you. And that's the whole premise of our show. So I brought it up to Melissa and she was like, yeah, okay, sure. And put it on our, our doc of like episode ideas. And I kept bringing it up. Hey, let's do that one of like, let's write that letter. Like, hey, let's write that letter. And sure enough, like Valentine's Day came around and I was like, let's write the letters.
It was perfect timing. And being like a PR person, I was like, fine, that works. I'll do
No,
it.
honestly, like I feel like Valentine's Day, I mean, it wasn't sad because I did celebrate Valentine's with, my friend, but it's like a weird weekend. So I could totally imagine if I did that, I would have a bottle before I write a whole letter. I'm like, let me get drunk and see what comes out. But okay, so you kind of like making Melissa write the letter. I kind of am curious as to who finished their letter first.
I did. Yeah, Vanessa finished her letter. And then I texted
Melissa and I told her like, hey, I just wrote my letter. And I cried. Good luck. That was my text. Hey, finish my letter. I cried. Good luck.
Yeah. And so I received that text and I was like, okay, great. I have something to look forward to. And I had actually noticed later, during that week when we were leading up to the recording date of that episode, I was not sleeping, like I was anxious and I didn't really realize the reasons until like the night before I decided, okay, this is when I left it to like the last minute. I was like, okay, I can't put this off anymore. We're going to have to record this episode. So I ended up writing my letter like the night before we recorded the episode. And yeah, it was a very emotional experience, especially when you put yourself into the shoes of like as if you were having that conversation with that person. Like you're writing a letter, but you're writing it as if you're having a conversation. So that was weird because obviously I hadn't done that in such a long time. So yeah, it was definitely an emotional experience for sure. And that was just writing it. And then recording it is a whole different dealio. So
right. So for the people like tuning in, they did each write letters to their exes, but if you listen to the episode, which I definitely suggest you do, there are two separate letters in both of their lives. One for Vanessa for a high school love, and then for Melissa, someone in her young adult life. So definitely not high school. But either or, like I wouldn't say one outweighs the other because love is love. Once you ladies kind of like finished writing the letters and wrote it, did y'all reflect and see like, dang, maybe there were some signs of, this wasn't gonna work out in the end? I kind of want to get the perspective from both of y'all after writing, like, what were those signs that you were like, whoa, like, now that I can reflect on it, like this is what it was at the end.
Vanessa, you made the face first, so I'll let you go first.
I know, I was like, whoa, she's ready.
I just feel like my entire letter was like a thank you and an I'm sorry and like a regret kind of thing. Because as you mentioned, my letter was to my first love, like my high school sweetheart. And without giving too much away from the letter, I tried to end things before I left for college because I thought that was the thing that you were supposed to do. And I'd heard in high school, like people tell you different things about what college is going to be like. And something that I remember hearing / reading about so often was about people who like couldn't let go of home. And I was going so far away from home that I was like, if I can't let go of home, I'm gonna have a really hard time. So I thought that breaking up with him was gonna be like the smart idea, but I was also scared to break up with him, which is why when he was like, let's not break up, I was like, okay, I guess let's not break up. But I think the fact that I wanted to should was like the biggest red flag, because obviously like we were, and I had given it some thought, like he was not going to college in the traditional sense, and he was doing things that I mean, looking back now, I realized it's like bullshit and it didn't matter what he was doing because he ended up, you know, fine in the end. But I was like, ugh, like, what are you doing with your life? Like, why aren't you going the same path and doing the same thing? And so that's also why I wanted to end things. But I was honestly just too scared. And so it was like a nagging thing. Like, I should probably not be with this person anymore. But because of fear, I let him kind of, I guess, talk me out of leaving. Like, it was so easy to talk me out of leaving. And then it just kind of became this like weird pseudo open relationship situation that was like not healthy for either of us. So I think the signs were wanting to end it in the first place, and like that nagging feeling afterwards where I was like, I shouldn't have let that happen. But I just kind of like, went off and did it anyway. So if you're listening and you're having that nagging feeling and you're thinking you want to leave, maybe explore that some more. And I didn't talk to anybody about it, which probably was my biggest mistake because I was kind of ashamed of it too. So talking it out probably could have helped if
I mean, yes, it
well,
would have probably, but like I was trying to think of myself in that time and being a friend to you in that time. And
uh-huh.
because I was such a late bloomer, at least in my opinion, I would have not understood. I would have been like, cool, I'm sorry, here's a hug, here's some snacks, but like I wouldn't know how to, I don't know, maybe you had more mature friends that weren't me, but maybe you did the best you could is what I'm trying to say in that situation. Like, you're high school, you can't.
No, I definitely can connect with you, Melissa. I was definitely a late bloomer. Like in high school, I wasn't even like thinking about boys like that. Like, yeah, I thought they were cute, but I wasn't really like,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I want to date. So when I came to college, that was my first experience of like, woo, like let me do my own thing. But I mean, listening to Vanessa's tell her story through the letter, I learned, and I feel like it's okay to evolve as a person with or without that person that you loved. People change, people grow. It's okay to have different stages in your life,
Mm-hmm.
So definitely I commend you for that, because I mean, at that time, that obviously that person's really important to you, but you did it for you at the end of the day, and I think that's what counts.
Yeah, I guess I wish I'd known that though at the time, that it was okay to grow and evolve. Like, I saw something the other day on Instagram, of course, that was like, it's okay if the person that you loved has become someone like that you've outgrown them or they've outgrown you, and like that happens. But high school
Mhm.
me, even though I did have the boyfriend and everything and like was, I thought, in love, like I didn't fucking know. Like I was like, oh no, we're not growing at the same time. That's wrong. Like that's not supposed to happen.
Hmm.
That's not what the movies told me. What's going on? So I
Yeah.
wish I'd known that sooner, because then I could have probably let go a lot easier. But I digress.
Right. And for Melissa, I mean, I know your letter, honestly, like your whole letter, I was crying. I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
I'm sorry. Like there are so many people that texted me that evening when the episode came out and they're like, you made me cry. And I was like, I'm sorry. I cried too. So yeah.
yeah. For you, what were some takeaways from, I guess, the relationship that you were kind of certain, like, yeah, I think the relationship has run its course for me?
Well, to be honest, I at the time was like, I didn't think we gave it a sure enough shot. Like I
Mhm.
thought, and I feel like that's probably a rollover from previous relationships that I've had. I always look at them and I'm like, well, what if we could have just tried, or like, but then with the retrospective now, I'm just like, there were the signs, going back to your original question of like, what were there some red flags in this in the relationship at the time. And I do remember like the couple months leading up to the breakup situation, which actually took 2 days to break up. We had like one conversation, and then I went home and I was like, I'm not satisfied with that, what we had just talked about. So I told him, I was like, I need to talk to you again. And it ended up being much better and a much better closure for the both of us. So I'm glad we did that. But in terms of the red flags, it was more like a gradual like divergence in terms of our communication with each other. We started off like really good friends, and that's how it ended up being more than that. And then we were so good about being on, like, pretty straightforward and honest and like real with each other. And then in the months like leading up to it, and I notice it now when I look back at like when we went out to do things together, go visit my cousins or things like that. There was this distance that I felt, and like me not really understanding where his head was at, and me having to ask more questions about like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And him not being as forward about things. So obviously there was a lot going on in his head at the time. So I mean, I don't know if anyone during that time could see that as a red flag as it's happening, but obviously with that retrospect now, I can say that was something. The communication was starting to break down. But yeah, that's when I confronted him about like, hey, what's going on? And then that's what led to the conversation of, I don't know if this is gonna work anymore. So there's that.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's hard to see it when you're in it. I mean, and even from the outside, like knowing both of you at that time, I couldn't tell. And I was also taken by surprise. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you went back for closure, even though it took 2 days.
And
like,
that was
you went and got it.
Yes, and that was because I had learned from previous relationships where I was like, I left it to be a thing of like, okay, well, I can't like really talk to this person anymore, but I'm still wondering and have all these questions that I would love to ask this person. But it's just like so out of context now. It would be too like so much time has passed. But yeah, so that's why I made it a point to be like, hey, actually, I think we need to talk through this some more, and so I can have a better understanding and have a better sense of closure on my end. And that was me being straightforward and being like, hey, I'm not satisfied with the conversation that we had. Let's talk through it some more. So yeah, we ended up.
I agree. I think with Vanessa too, like, I'm so glad you did get the closure, because I mean, the reason why I was bawling, honestly, was because I had a situationship that lasted 7 months. Also, I would call it quarantine situationship, so maybe that's why I was kind of attached to this person. But when I tried to get closure, that person kind of just shut me off. And I kind of felt like robbed of the closure that I felt that I deserved. So I know, like, different situations, sometimes no closure is closure. But the fact that you kind of like communicated that to your ex and you did get the response that I guess you wanted and needed, I definitely applaud that, because for me, I was just like, what the fuck? I didn't get my closure.
Yeah, that's no bueno. I don't understand. And then I guess that's like not on you, like it's something that people are just afraid. I think a lot of people navigate these situations. Breakups are always hard just to begin with, like the whole topic. And some people just are not at that like emotional maturity to have those conversations, those hard conversations, even though it's like a breakup conversation, like the going back and forth too of should we break up and shouldn't we break up, those kinds of things too. That's something that comes with youth, because you're trying to figure out like what you even want. But after you've gone through a number of relationships, I don't know, you just kind of have these things on the list on the side of like, okay, next time I'm not doing this, not doing that. I want this and I want that. And that's like not a non-negotiable. But some people that like sucks, Carmen, that like you weren't able to have that conversation because that's unfair to you. And yeah. He sucks.
No, he does. I definitely learned my lesson. But that kind of like honestly leads me to the next topic too, was that the letters, they weren't in a sense like attacking the person. It wasn't like, fuck you, like you hurt me. Honestly, because if I had written the letter, I would have been like, dear, fuck you, period. But that would be me last year. But yeah, both of your letters were really like well written. They weren't attacking the person. If anything, it was kind of like a thank you, like a closure, like thank you for what you did. But I kind of wanted to know, after going through that relationship, and learning some takeaways, have you applied some of those things that you've learned in those relationships to new ones?
Well, I'm a single person right now. So
Okay.
my relationship is with myself. And yes, I have applied a lot of those things that I've learned from that relationship to the way I see myself. And I think that was reflected in the letter that I wrote. It was a lot about thank you for reinforcing the strengths that I have and for never making me feeling like I was dumb, which is a situation that I had in a previous relationship where constantly I felt like I was stupid and I wasn't enough. So that's mainly the reason why I still appreciate that relationship that I had to the ex that I wrote the letter to, because he never let me feel like I was less than. And I continue building on that strength because, gotta love me before I can love anybody else. But yeah, that's what I've learned and what I've tried to apply at least.
First, I want to go back a little bit, Carmen. I think it's okay if right now the letter that you or other people are writing is filled with a bunch of expletives and is very angry. I think I think the reason Melissa and I can maybe write letters that are full of gratitude is because it's been a little bit, a little longer for me, but it's not as fresh. And I think maybe if you are watching it and you want to try this, I maybe would recommend coming back to the letter in a little bit after you've had some time and you can take a different set of eyes and look at it in a different way. Because honestly, like when I first broke up with blank, I
almost
probably
did
also was.
I'm like, is that his real name?
I feel like I probably also would have been upset at several things, like, why can't you just get your shit together and do XYZ, and like then this wouldn't have been a problem and blah blah blah. But knowing that, and we're like looking back now, like, okay, like I like that wasn't the problem though. The problem was that he was at a different place, I was at a different place. Both those places were okay to be, just not together and not at that time. And that's fine now looking back, but it took me a while to get to this point. So I don't think it's an immediate thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah.
And you're allowed to feel that way too. Like, go ahead and write that fuck you, like that's part of the, there were other exes that I could have chosen from to write a letter to that would have not been as nice, but I chose to do the one that I felt like I had grown the most from. So yeah, it just so happened to be that way.
And even if your letter is a big FU, like, I guess I've already cussed, I don't know why I'm abbreviating now. But even if your letter is one big fuck you to the other person, like, I think the key point, or the part that you need to also try to do, is think about, like, what did you learn for yourself though? Because in those expletives and in those angry parts of your letter, there's stuff about you that you've learned that you don't want. And Melissa already kind of spoke to this, like, then you put that on the list. That's something that you don't want for next time. And then you move on eventually.
Yeah, eventually,
Eventually.
takes time.
No, it's true. I feel like for me, it literally happened last year, which is crazy that we just passed last year. But yeah, it happened last year. So it is a little fresh, but I do agree that I did learn a lot of things about myself, because honestly, like, that's the whole reason why I started this show, which is called Tu Novio, which in Spanish, which in English means where is your boyfriend? Because I've never had a legit boyfriend. So having this situationship, which lasted so long, that was my first introduction to a relationship. So for me, that was a pat on my back. I was like, you know what, like, I can be committed to someone. So I definitely did learn a lot of things during that little fling during quarantine.
Hey, it's a stepping stone. It's your experiences are yours and yours only, you know, and it's only going to make you better in the end.
Yes. Before we close off, though, I wanted to kind of talk about the support that I saw and heard in the podcast. I just loved how sweet it was that, you know, both of y'all are friends and both of y'all know who these people are. So it's kind of like outside looking in. Was there something that both of y'all learned about each other as you read the letters?
I can start in terms of things that I learned about Vanessa. Well, one, just going back to the start of our conversation here, I mean, I was trying to put myself into the shoes of like high school Melissa, and if I would have been even able to support her in the capacity that she probably needed during that time for a breakup situation like she was going through. And I would like to think that I would be able to, like I mentioned, I could bring her snacks and things like that, but I don't know. Like I learned a different side of Vanessa that I didn't know prior in terms of her level of vulnerability. Like, I mean, whenever me and Vanessa are together, we can talk about deep stuff, but like she had never really talked to me about this particular breakup before. I had seen or like been in her life, obviously in the aftermath of it, and hearing from through conversations we had on the phone about it, but like never really did we sit down and like talk about like how did you how are you doing? Like, you know, like we never really sat down and talked about that. And would we have been able to do that at that time in our lives? Maybe not. You know, I feel like we would have, I don't know, but it was like it was a nice little time capsule that I could, a little piece of the puzzle to Vanessa that I hadn't really known before. So, yeah.
Yeah, I am not typically the more vulnerable one. I feel like sometimes Melissa is the one whose feelings are a little more I don't want to
I'm
say
the
on the surface.
I'm the self-pronounced crybaby. Vanessa never really cries. I cry all the time, and I've, you know, but so yeah, that was a new thing for her to be like choking up as she was reading this letter. I was like, no, you can't do that because then I'm gonna start. You can't turn this waterfall on. It's not gonna turn off. But yeah.
I think for me it was really nice. Nice is a weird word to use when your friend is crying in front of you. But it was really nice to see Melissa like let go, because I think it's hard when the other person is so good. And it's hard when you break up with somebody and it's not like a bitter, angry, like they did something wrong. And so I always kind of wondered how she was doing with that. And so it was really nice to see her just like release and let go of those feelings. And no one can see this but me because we didn't record it, but just like as she was reading, just like I could almost like feel the memories coming off of her and kind of like the excess weight. You know, there's a weight that you carry around almost like a secret, almost like how shame can be carried on and like in your body and on your shoulders and everything. And just like the weight of that being lifted off of her a little bit was really nice to see her like relax into that. So so I recommend doing this with a friend. I mean, I say this in the episode too, but like if you can coerce another friend into doing this with you, this uncomfortable practice, I think it's really amazing because people write letters, people write in their diary, people write in their like little notes, whatever, on your phone. But to read it out loud to somebody else who is not the person who the letter is to, especially if they know who you're writing about, it's kind of like a therapeutic experience, honestly.
I was going to say that. Yeah, it was very much a cathartic experience. And obviously, we say in the episode, like, don't actually send these letters to your exes.
No.
Please don't.
Don't do that.
PSA, don't do that. This is for you and for you only. Like,
Yeah.
it's a therapeutic experience to be able to do it. And even though like I had to be bullied into it, I don't regret it. And I actually do stand with Vanessa and say that I recommend it as a exercise that you can do for yourself in terms of the healing process for you. Because even though that like a long time had passed for Vanessa, I'm sure there was a number of things that, you know, bringing those memories up probably, yeah, it's a time of reflection for sure. And whether it was like an old relationship or a recent relationship, just being able to like articulate those feelings and put it down on paper and then read it aloud to someone else and have them help you decipher that is actually really, really healing. So highly recommend.
No, I love that. I mean, coming back to the name of the podcast, I'm uncomfortable. Putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation just means that you are growing as a person. You're open to growth. You're open to change. So that says a lot about both of y'all and y'all's characters, and also just as people in general. So like, again, I just want to say thank you so much for putting yourself out there, being uncomfortable for your podcast and then for this show. And like Vanessa and Melissa said, you know, if you want and are open to trying this exercise, you should definitely try it. Write a letter to your ex. I might do that actually, because I feel like I need to do that. I haven't really like touched that subject, so I know I'm gonna do it, but if you're listening, I think you should do that as well. But before we close off, how can listeners check your podcast? What are some things that you would like for them to know about how to support the I'm Uncomfortable podcast?
Okay, I was pointed to, so that means I have to do this. This is the thing about like a duo, we're like signaling to each other who's going to take it. So we are on Instagram at imuncomfortable.podcast. So you can follow us there. If you do write a letter to your ex, share with us your experience, like DM us, message us. We also have a website, imuncomfortablepodcast.com. We have all of our episodes on there that you can list through all of season 1, season 2, as well as a contact page, which I think is really, really great because you can send us episode ideas if you want to shout out a friend or anything that you want to just say. Maybe you want to just be like, hey, Vanessa's voice was really soothing in this last episode. I loved it. Send us those. We love that too. But yeah, there's so many ways to connect with us. We love hearing from you all, and we love that we're building this little I'm Uncomfortable community. I think it's gonna just be great to get more feedback and more episodes in. So we're excited for season 2 to keep unrolling. So that's how you can reach us.
Yeah, so like she mentioned, the I'm Uncomfortable podcast is available on all streaming platforms. They do have a website. Definitely write your letters to your exes, DM them. I feel like I'm gonna DM y'all like what happens.
Yes, please let us know.
Yes.
I'm gonna make myself uncomfortable for the sake of the show.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Vanessa and Melissa, for being here. I definitely love this conversation, and I think, you know, we should make ourselves more uncomfortable more often. And thank you so much for taking time out of your days to be on the show. And I hope that you all have a good rest of your week and enjoy your weekends. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week with another episode. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.